Hi, I'm Kristin from lifeofstones.com. Today I want to share a little bit about how we found ourselves $55,000 in debt, how we worked to pay it all off and become debt-free, and how we found ourselves back in debt. So if you enjoy hearing debt-free stories, then stick around. If you're new to my channel, my name is Kristin. I have a blog called lifeofstones.com where I share personal finance tips, saving money tips and tricks, and a little bit about our own personal journey to get out of debt to help inspire and motivate others to do the same. Today I wanted to share a little bit about our story with you. Now my channel is fairly new, so I know we don't know each other that well yet, and I thought I would take this opportunity to explain to you how this blog came about. My husband and I have been married for almost 15 years, and when we got together, neither of us had a dime to our names. We both had decent jobs and made decent money, but we spent everything we earned. We each probably had about $20 in our bank account, and as often happens, we fell in love, we quickly got engaged, we decided to get married, and thus began our life of being broke together. Our entire relationship, we've been broke, or at least thought we've been broke, but really we've just been mismanaging our money. So this will get a little bit personal today, but I know for myself that I find some of these stories so inspirational, and you know, we didn't exactly pay off $1 million in 6 months, but I prefer hearing the real life stories. The stories of normal, everyday people who just were broke and busted and decided to make a change and did just that, change their lives, change their family tree. And I wanted to just share that with you today. When my husband and I got engaged, we were actually living with my in-laws in an apartment above their 3-car garage that my husband had built once he got out of the Marines. We were really fortunate to stay there, and we only paid the electric bill for our place and my in-laws' place. So in the summer, that was just a couple $100, but everything in both the houses were electric. So in the winter, that bill got closer to probably $400 or $500. Even so, we were really living reasonably. We both had a car payment because we just thought everybody had a car payment always. That was normal, and we assumed we always would have a car payment. Quickly after we got married, we ended up purchasing our first home, and we moved into the house. It was the only house we looked at. We didn't look around like we should have, and we purchased that house. It was very inexpensive, although it seemed super expensive to us at the time. We were scared. We weren't sure how we were going to make it work because we already felt like we had trouble paying our bills. So we moved into this house, and it was very inexpensive. And we were both making decent money at that time. We both had full-time jobs, and it wasn't a ton of money, but we made plenty of money to pay our bills. We should have been able to pay all of our bills and save money and invest, but we didn't. So at that time, we were young. We were still going out to bars with friends a lot. I was shopping. I was spending a lot of money on clothes and shoes, and we didn't have any children yet, and we just thought, okay, this is what you do when you're younger. We were fortunate to receive a lot of money for our wedding when we got married, and we ended up spending all of it. We bought a dog. We bought a mountain bike. I bought a pair of designer sunglasses. We spent $10,000 in probably a matter of just a few short months. Now, I will say that we did take $1,000 and invest that and open 4 different investment accounts, 2 mutual funds, and we each opened a Roth IRA. Unfortunately, we never really contributed to them. Besides the initial deposit, we never put any money into them. So it never grew, and we never really earned anything on those accounts. We were on the right track, but we just didn't really have any follow-through. Shortly after that, I switched jobs. We had a baby. We moved into another house. That one almost doubled our mortgage. We didn't change our spending habits in any way. Now let me be clear here. We didn't really live above our means. We didn't drive fancy cars. Both of our homes were semi-detached homes. We loved both of them. But my point is, neither of them were a mansion. It's not like we had these huge, huge mortgages. They were very, very affordable. And so we really weren't living above our means. We weren't trying to live a lavish lifestyle. What we didn't do was pay attention to what we were spending. I've always been a shopper. I've always been a spender. I've never been a saver. I wish I was. I'm trying desperately to teach my children to do things differently than I did, so they don't find themselves kind of making the same mistakes that we did. However, I've always been a spender, and my husband is a spender too, and we're both very spontaneous. So neither of us planned out purchases or really thought things out ahead of time. It was if we wanted something and it seemed like a great idea and it seemed like we could afford it, we would do it. We never followed that rule where if you want something big, go home and sleep on it, and if you still want it, then go ahead and purchase it. That's a great rule, by the way, but we never stuck to that. So we got our second house, we got pregnant with our second child. I lost my job at that time while I was pregnant, came home for a couple of months, had my son, and then I went back to work full-time, a brand new job. It was a great job. I was hired to be an office manager for a small manufacturing company, and I worked there for 4 years. I made pretty decent money. And not too long after I went back to work, we decided we were going to move again. Looking back, deciding to move the third time was probably the turning point where really the scales started tipping more towards accruing debt. So we both had a car payment still at this time, and we had maybe very minimal credit card charges, which would go up and down. We'd rack about $1,000 or $2,000 up on our credit card, and then we would pay it all off. We only had one card at the time, and then we'd rack it up for $1,000 and we'd pay, and this cycle continued. But when we decided to move, we weren't ready to move. We did not have any money in the bank for a down payment. We didn't have any real emergency fund. We didn't have any kind of a house fund to make purchases for the house or save money for repairs we might need to do or things that might go wrong. We were not prepared. We needed at least 1 full year at that point in our lives when we were affording our bills, no problem, 1 full year, and we could have sucked a ton of money away and done things very differently. My husband was in the Marines, so we are able to use the VA loan. We didn't know at that time that that's more of an expensive way to purchase a home. So we just looked at a VA loan as being a really great tool for us because we didn't need to save a down payment. So when you do a VA loan, you don't need down money. However, you do pay a funding fee, and that funding fee increases each time you do the loan. So that third time we moved was the third time we've used this loan. So our funding fee kept increasing. So we moved again. Like I said, we weren't ready. We should have waited at least another year, but our daughter was about to start kindergarten, so we thought we would just do it. We would suck it up. We really thought ahead. We knew we were going to be a little house poor. We knew vacations would have to go on hold, which was fine because we weren't big travelers to begin with. We knew we wouldn't be able to do a lot. We were really unhappy where we were living, and collectively we decided that this was going to be worth it. We knew it was a little premature, but we were willing to make some major sacrifices to move sooner than later. At that time, we bought what had always been my dream house growing up. It was the same type of house that all of my friends lived in when I was younger, and I always envied them and thought they were so wonderful, and I wanted to live in a house like that. So we were really flying high. We got a brand new home. We got to decorate it however we wanted. We got to do everything from scratch, and that had always been a dream of mine. So I was feeling so grateful and so blessed, and we did okay for a little while. We did buy a bunch of furniture, probably spent almost $10,000 furnishing the house, and of course that was on credit. It was interest-free for maybe a year or two, but at that time now we had a big mortgage, we had 2 car loans, and now we had this furniture as well. So our expenses, you can see, were really growing each month, it felt. After we moved into our house, we were really happy here. We still are happy here. This is the home we're still in. This is the home where I feel like our family has the most memories and the best times. This home will always be near and dear to me. I don't regret moving here, but I do regret not doing things a little bit differently. So shortly after we moved here, I really started to be unhappy in my job, and it was really starting to take its toll on me. The working full-time, I was gone probably 60 hours a week, and I really just wanted to be home with my kids. That's all I ever wanted my whole life, really, was that when I was a mom, to be home with my kids. My mother was never able to do that with us. After my parents split up, she was a single mom, and she worked so hard, and I always wished she could be home with us, and she couldn't. That wasn't possible for her. So that was always so important to me. And A couple years after we moved here, we decided that I was going to leave my job to come and be home with my kids. And that worked for a little while. At the time, I had joined a network marketing company that I loved and I had so much passion for. It was a health and wellness company, and I really thought coming home was going to allow me to put so much more time into that and build that business so much faster. I've always been super entrepreneurial, and that was my dream, just to build my own business from home and be home with my kids. Well, I didn't do so good. I didn't do what I needed to do to build that business, to be successful, and eventually the money I was making kept going downhill. Fast forward a couple years, I hung on, I did a couple different side hustles, and I started helping my parents with some businesses that they have. But inevitably, the debt kept climbing, and we really started racking up our credit cards. We used our credit cards for everything, which was okay because we paid it off all the time. But the problem was we did not have enough money coming in every month at this point to pay off our bills. So a couple of times we really tried to budget. We tried so hard. And you can maybe relate to this, but when we sat down and we put all our numbers on paper, the money coming in was always less than the money that had to go out. And it was so discouraging. It was so overwhelming that, we'd make it for a month or two and it would just fall apart. The only way we could get through the month was to really put as many expenses as possible on a credit card, which would just buy us time for a week or two until the next paycheck came in, and then I would pay that. So it was this constant cycle: charge on the card, paycheck come in, pay the bills, use whatever was left on the card. Bridge the gap until the next paycheck. So nothing was ever really getting paid off. And it wasn't accruing like crazy, but it was slightly accruing over this time, just little by little. Then we had an emergency with our dog, and that overnight hospital stay for our dog ended up costing us more than 1 full month's mortgage. And that had to go on a credit card because we didn't have the money to cover that. Then we put a fence in for our dog. That went on a credit card. I always say Murphy dropped by and paid us a couple visits, but that's how these things happen. It was one after another, and we couldn't catch our breath, and I felt like I was drowning. I always knew something had to change. I have had money stress my entire adult life. My entire relationship with my husband has been based on money stress, and the weight on my shoulders was just too much to bear. We couldn't handle it anymore. I decided in October of 2016, that was it. I had to go back to work. What I was doing at home, I had started another side business. That wasn't working either. And I knew that that was our breaking point. That was the moment when everything felt like it was going to fall apart. Nothing I was trying to do on the side to make money and start a business, nothing was working. My husband was burnt out at his job. I felt like I didn't spend enough time with my kids, and I was home all the time, but I was constantly stressed. We were always fighting, we were always bickering, and it was all related to money, always. Money was the root, always. I said to my husband one day, that's it. The only thing that can stop this cycle is me going back to work, bringing in a real consistent income, and we have to dig ourselves out of this hole. I went back to work in October. I found a great part-time job. It was only part-time because my husband's schedule is very strange and he can get stuck at work at any time. So I really have to have a lot of flexibility in my schedule, which is part of the reason why I had come home in the first place, so that somebody's always here for the kids. But I was able to find something that paid me decently for a part-time, and that gave me some flexibility in my schedule. So I went back to work. That was October 2016. Come January 2017, at a church nearby us, I heard they were having financial peace. And I had heard about it before. In fact, we had used the debt snowball method to pay off my student loans a couple years prior, but we never stuck to it. We had tried the cash envelope system before, we had tried budgeting before, but it just didn't stick with us, and we never really changed our habits. And that's the disconnect there. You can pay off your debt, but if you're not able to change your habits to fix the root of your problem, it's always going to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So that's where we were at. I knew I had to take this class, and I was willing to take it by myself if I had to. I talked to my husband and was shocked when he said he would go. So we went. We took the class kind of on a whim. I read the book the first 2 days they gave it to us, looked through the workbook. We went to every class. We never missed. We did all the exercises. We did our budget, and something was different. Something just clicked this time. And I really think a lot of this has to do with timing. If you're struggling with some of the things that I'm talking about, and you've tried before, and you've tried probably multiple times, and you just haven't gotten anywhere, and you're feeling really discouraged and really disappointed, just know that I truly believe when the time is right, things will fall into place. When the time is right, things will click, and you'll have a drive, and you'll have willpower like you've never been able to have before. And I really think that's what makes all the difference in the world when it comes to a debt-free journey. So you need a why. And my why at that time was honestly saving my marriage and changing our life, because we couldn't continue to live the way we were living. We paid off through taking financial peace, living on a budget, and working our butts off. We paid off exactly $35,000 in 7 months to the day. Everything changed. Everything changed. I mean, it was such a blessing. It was such a blessing the way it came into our lives, that it came into our lives at the time I did, and it turned everything around. So we were debt-free in August of 2017 for a couple months, and I was still at my job. Everything was going well. We weren't starting our emergency fund. We weren't starting baby step 3 yet because Christmas was coming. So we had Christmas we wanted to save for and cash flow, and my daughter was getting braces. So we wanted to save and cash flow that before we worked on building our full emergency fund. And something weird happened around this time. The side business I mentioned that was now doing worse and worse and worse, it was an online business, so there was no physical location. There was no giant loans to buy a building or lease a building or buy a vehicle. But what we did have was inventory, and we had major advertising costs. So what happened was, over the course of the year and a half of that business, we had accrued almost $20,000 of debt on credit cards for that business. The revenue of the business was making the credit card payments and above every single month. But at this point, the sales were continuing to decline, and what was happening was, between the big balances, having to purchase more inventory, the high cost of advertising, me making some mistakes along the way, admittedly, is we were just drowning. We were drowning. We could pay the cards no problem, but we couldn't get any traction. So we made a really difficult decision. What happens is, when you go on a debt-free journey, or you go on a journey, even if you're not in debt, to manage your finances in a different way, in a better way, be a good steward, change the way you deal with money, what happens is your perspective changes. So whereas before I thought $20,000 is no big deal. If I were to open a store in a physical location somewhere, my debt would probably be in the hundreds of thousands. So I told myself it was okay, that it's something that every business has. Every business has a little bit of debt, not a big deal. But through that journey of paying off our personal debt, I couldn't take it anymore. I could not, my shoulders could not bear the weight of that debt. It weighed on me 3 times as heavy as it ever has before, because here we got our personal finances in order, and we just climbed out of this big hole. Yet on the other side, on this business, I was struggling so much to be successful and so much to turn it around, that I was telling myself these stories that this was okay, and I would get it paid off, and things would get better, and as soon as sales picked up. But the reality is that debt would continue to grow and grow and grow, and I couldn't handle it anymore. I had lost all passion for that business. I had no desire to even work the business anymore, which I also believe attributed to the decline. And my husband and I had some really tough talks, and I counseled with my mom and a couple of my friends that I feel are really, really wise and just make great decisions. And I knew they would give me really good, honest feedback that would be in our best interest. And we finally made the decision to close that business. And it was such a hard decision because, number one, I felt like a failure. I was determined to make this work, and I thought it was a great idea. And I had seen so many people be super successful, but it wasn't for us, and I didn't want to give up because I didn't want to have to tell everybody that I failed. But the other part of that was financially, with that business closed, we had no revenue to now pay the credit card payments. We had no way to pay that, and that was our personal responsibility. We didn't have an LLC. We weren't going to file bankruptcy. We were not trying to wiggle our way out of this at all. It was our responsibility. It was our decisions that accrued that debt, and it was our job to pay it off. So we took on an additional, after being debt-free for 4 months, we took on an additional $19,500 of debt. So that is why if you see us talking about being back into debt and you see on our website that we were out of debt, I don't want there to be a disconnect. I want you to understand that is why we're back in debt. We took on that debt December 2017, and now we're working to pay it off, and we're doing the best we can. I put our whole debt-free journey on Instagram. It keeps us accountable and allows me to connect with a bunch of you that are on the same journey or looking to start their own debt-free journey. So I'm going to put my links down in the description. If you find me on there, I would love to connect with you and hear about your own journey. We've been working so hard, and now we are under $14,000. I can't wait to have this paid off and be truly debt-free, because even when we were debt-free in August, I knew we still had this, and I knew that even though this was business debt, ultimately it was our personal responsibility. So I feel like even though being debt-free for a couple of months was incredible and felt so great and felt super free, there was always kind of this black cloud no longer over us, but I felt like this black cloud was kind of following behind us, and I just couldn't shake it. So this time, when we are paid off, we will owe nothing to anybody except for our mortgage. We have 3 credit cards. They're all 0% interest, and we're just chipping away until we get these paid off. I'm sorry this video got so long, but that was the story of how we got into debt and how we've paid off almost all our debt and our journey through baby step 2. If you have any questions or comments or want to share your own journey, if you leave that in the comments, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to chat with you guys more about this. I'm also going to leave a link to the blog post I have about this on my website. You can also download a free debt tracker while you're there if you want to get started on your own debt-free journey. Thank you for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and please subscribe, and I hope to see you back here again.